Before I go further, let me introduce to you someone who will make a great First Lady, my wife, Jane Sanders. And let me also thank all of this is, as I understand it, the largest turnout in New Hampshire in this election cycle. 2,000 people. Thank you. And let me thank Davis Bernstein. Let me thank Sunflower Bean. Let me thank Twiddle. Let me thank Professor Phil Barker. Let me thank Mohammed Zinni. And let me thank Tim Robbins. You all know Tim is a great actor, but what he has done is used his influence, his name recognition to stand up and fight for justice, to stand up and fight for our environment. Tim, thank you so much for what you're doing. Let me thank Terry. Let me thank the Lieutenant Governor of the state of Vermont, Dave Zuckerman. And let me thank Senator Turner has for years been doing some of the most important work that anybody in a democracy can do. She's been all over this country getting working people and young people involved in the political process to stand up for justice. Senator Turner, thank you for what you're doing. This campaign is about two fundamental principles. First of all, it is absolutely imperative that we defeat the most dangerous president in the modern history of this country. We may disagree on this issue or that issue. That's called democracy. But I think all Americans, regardless of whether or not they are conservative, moderate, progressive, independent, Republican, Democrat, understand that America is not about having a president who is a pathological liar, who is corrupt, who is a racist, a sexist, a homophobe, a xenophobe, and a religious bigot. That is not the kind of person who should be in the White House, and we will make sure that he will not continue to be in the White House. Now, our campaign is off to a great start. As some of you may know, we won the popular vote in the Iowa caucus by 6,000 votes. And while the turnout there was not as high as I would have liked, what was extraordinary is that young people under 30 saw an increase in their percentage of votes by 33%. And if we continue that in New Hampshire and all across this country of young people, who are today, in my view, the most progressive generation in the history of this country, if they get involved in the political process, if they come out to vote in large numbers, there is no stopping our movement. And I want to thank the people of New Hampshire for helping to transform politics and government policy in this country. And I'll tell you how that happened. 4 years ago, when I was running and I came here to New Hampshire, we had a list of proposals and an agenda that spoke to the needs of the working families of this state and the country. And we brought forth that agenda, and the corporate establishment said, too radical. And the political establishment said, too radical. And the media establishment said, too radical. But you know what the people of New Hampshire said? They said it was a pretty good set of proposals. So what happened here in New Hampshire with our victory here 4 years ago, it suddenly made people all over the country reassess what is possible and what the American people want. And after we won here in New Hampshire, we won 21 more states, won 13 million votes, and we transformed not only the political dialogue in America, but in state after state. For example, the minimum wage has been raised to $15 an hour. So I want to thank New Hampshire. You have shown the country and the world that this is a state that stands for justice, that stands for economic justice, social justice, racial justice, and environmental justice. New Hampshire, thank you. And what our campaign is about is asking the American people to think outside of the box. All right? And that means asking questions that you're not going to see on TV. You're not going to hear in the Congress. To ask why it is, for example, in the wealthiest country in the history of the world, half of our people are living paycheck to paycheck. Why it is that tonight, over 500,000 Americans will be sleeping out on the streets or in homeless shelters. Why it is that at a time when the little children need high-quality child care, our child care system is dysfunctional. Why it is that over the last 3 years, the billionaires in this country under Donald Trump saw an $800 billion increase in their wealth. But the average American worker last year saw a 1% increase in his or her wages. And the questions that we have got to ask ourselves: is it morally or economically acceptable that 3 people in America, 1, 2, 3, own more wealth than the bottom half of American society? Is it acceptable that the top 1% own more wealth than the bottom 92%? Is it acceptable that when in Vermont and in New Hampshire and around this country, we got people working 2 or 3 jobs to provide for their families, 49% of all new income goes to the top 1%. And that is why what we have got to do is create a government and an economy that works for all of us, not just wealthy campaign contributors. Donald Trump is a threat to democracy. All right? He believes, and the impeachment process has empowered him to believe that he is above the law. He doesn't have to listen to Congress. He can do whatever he wants. Well, what we have got to do in defeating Trump is revitalize American democracy. One person, one vote, not billionaires buying elections. Because at the end of the day, If you want to know why there is so much income and wealth inequality in America, why we're the only major country on earth not to guarantee health care for all, why we pay the highest prices in the world for prescription drugs, why 45 million people are owing student debt, why we are not addressing the crisis of climate change. If you want to know the answer to that, it all comes down to money in politics and the power of billionaires. And I am enormously proud, and I really am, to tell you that our campaign has received more campaign contributions, almost 7 million, from more Americans, 1.5 million Americans, averaging all of $18.50 a contribution, more contributions from more people than any candidate in the history of the United States of America. So we don't, unlike other campaigns, we don't have billionaires pouring huge amounts of money. We don't have the CEOs of the pharmaceutical industry putting money into our campaigns. We don't have representatives of the fossil fuel industry funding our campaign. Our campaign is funded by working people. It stands for working people, and it will develop policy for working people. So what are we going to do? What is the agenda for working people? Number one, in the richest country in the history of the world, if you work 40 hours a week, you're not going to live in poverty. We raised that minimum wage to at least $15 an hour. If you are a woman, you're not going to receive 80 cents on the dollar compared to a man. Equal pay for equal work. And if you are one of the millions of workers in this country who wants to join a union, we're going to make it easier to join a union, not harder. We have legislation that will double union membership in 4 years. And being on the campus of a great college, we have got to talk about education. And when we talk about education, again, I'm asking you to think outside of the box. We have got to create new priorities in America, and at the top of those priorities must be education. Now, what does that mean? And I want to take a look at where we are today. All right? We got any psychologists in the room here tonight? There you go. We do. We have a number. And they will agree with me, I am sure, that the ages of 0 through 4 are the most important ages for intellectual and emotional development for a human being. Everybody knows that. And yet think how we treat the children in this country. We have the highest rate of childhood poverty of almost any major country on earth. Working families cannot find quality and affordable child care. So we are going to change priorities. Instead of giving tax breaks to billionaires, we're going to have high quality, affordable child care for every working family in America. We are going to triple funding for low-income Title I schools, because the education our kids get should not depend on the wealth, property taxes of their zip code. And because we believe in education, we believe in educators. And we understand that teachers are doing some of the most important work in this country. couple of months ago, I sat down with a group of the Hampshire educators, and they told me that in this state, which is not a poor state, but in this state, there are teachers who are beginning to teach in school districts, and they are receiving less than $29,000 a year. What does that say about our commitment to education and to the children? What we will do is reprioritize education in America, and we will give teachers the respect and the remuneration they deserve. No teacher in America should make less than $60,000 a year. And I'll tell you something else. What we have got to do is make sure that every kid in the 5th grade, the 8th grade, understands that if he or she studies hard and has the desire and the ability to get a higher education, college or trade school or whatever, that young person will be able to get that higher education regardless of the income of their family. And that is why we will make public colleges and universities tuition free. $11 years ago, 12 years ago, the United States Congress, against my vote, bailed out the crooks on Wall Street who nearly destroyed our economy. 2 years ago, against my vote, Congress gave $1 trillion in tax breaks to the 1% in large profitable corporations. The result of that is that companies like Amazon, that last year made $11 billion in profit, didn't pay a nickel in federal taxes. Well, if we could bail out the crooks on Wall Street and give tax breaks to billionaires, we can cancel all student debt in America. There's another issue that the American people feel very strongly about. When I hold town meetings in New Hampshire, all over this country, the issue that keeps coming up is the dysfunctionality of the current healthcare system. We have a system in which we are spending twice as much per capita on healthcare as are the people of Canada or any other nation. And yet 87 million Americans are either uninsured or underinsured. 30,000 people a year die. 30,000 die because they don't get to a doctor on time. And 500,000 people go bankrupt because of medically related bills. We are the only major country on earth not to guarantee health care to all people as a human right. And brothers and sisters, that is going to change under our administration. And then on top of all of that, we pay by far the highest prices in the world for prescription drugs. So our message to the healthcare industry, the insurance companies, and the drug companies is pretty simple. You are going to stop ripping off the American people. We are going to finally do what presidents have talked about for a very long time. Guarantee health care to every man, woman, and child through a Medicare for all single-payer program. We cannot afford this current system. We cannot afford a system where so many are uninsured or underinsured and where the average American family is paying $12,000 a year for health care. We are going to pass a Medicare for all single-payer program, no premiums, no co-payments, no deductibles, no out-of-pocket expenses. You go to the doctor when you need to go to the doctor. And if, God forbid, you're in the hospital, you're going to come out of that hospital and not go bankrupt. No cost for hospital care. This is not a radical idea. You know, you're going to watch on television and my critics will say, oh my God, this is radical. This exists right here on the New Hampshire-Vermont border in Canada. They're able to do it. UK is able to do it. Germany is able to do it. Scandinavia is able to do it. In fact, every major country on earth guarantees health care to all. We are going to do the same. The strength of a great nation is you don't run away from serious issues. You don't push them under the rug. And let me tell you what is one of the great issues and crises facing this country and the entire world, and that is the existential threat of climate change. Now, it is beyond pathetic that we have a president who not only thinks that climate change is a hoax, but he is actually exacerbating the problem by encouraging more fossil fuel production. Well, we have a different perspective. You want to hear a really radical idea? My administration will listen to scientists, not right-wing politicians. And what the scientists are telling us, and it gives me no pleasure to tell you this, because this is scary stuff. What the scientists, the people who know the most about climate change, are telling us now in the last year, they have underestimated the severity and speed in which climate change is causing havoc in our own country and all over the world. Polar ice caps are melting at a faster rate than they had thought. Oceans are warming at a faster rate than they had thought. If we do not get our act together and the seas continue to rise, you're going to see major cities like Miami, New Orleans, Charleston, South Carolina, New York City. You're going to see countries like Bangladesh and Vietnam being significantly underwater by the end of the century. You're going to see more drought. Turn on the TV. Look at what's going on in Australia right now. In 20, 50 years, that's not going to be the exception. That's going to be happening all over the world. We saw the disasters in California. Talk about more extreme weather disturbances. A couple of months ago, Venice, Italy, underwater. Houston, Texas, underwater. Talk about the growth of disease because bacteria thrive in hot weather. The United Nations tells us that if we don't get our act together, we're going to see hundreds of millions of climate refugees, people no longer able to live in their communities because there's no clean water, there's no land to grow their crops. We have what the scientists, not Bernie Sanders, what the scientists are calling an existential threat to our planet. We have a very short period of time to act, or else there will be irreparable damage, and the planet that we will be leaving to our children and future generations will be increasingly uninhabitable, increasingly unhealthy, increasingly unlivable. We have a moral responsibility to act. And I am proud to tell you, I am very proud to tell you that we have introduced the most sweeping and comprehensive climate change proposal ever introduced by any candidate for federal office. It is It is based on the principles of the Green New Deal, and it is a proposal that will transform our energy system away from fossil fuel into energy efficiency and sustainable energies. Now, this problem, I wish I could tell you that this was just an American problem. I wish I could tell you that as president, I'll take on the fossil fuel industry, we'll do what has to be done in this country. But that's not enough. This is a global problem that impacts every country on earth. So what I will tell you as president, I will lead the effort to reach out to the people in China, in Russia, in India, in Pakistan, in Brazil, all over the world, and make the case that as a planet, we are in this together. And that maybe, just maybe, instead of spending $1.8 trillion a year collectively on weapons of destruction designed to kill each other, maybe we pool our resources and fight our common enemy, which is climate change. That's right. Thank you. We can do it. Now, this is a tough issue, and I would be kidding you if I didn't tell you it was a tough issue. But we can do it. Instead of hiding from the reality of climate change, our job is to lead the world in changing our energy system. And by the way, when we do that, and we transform our energy system, when we transform our transportation system, when we transform our agricultural system, when we make our buildings much more energy efficient, we are going to create up to 20 million good-paying union jobs. And when we talk about the issues facing the United States, we got to put them front and center. We cannot run away from them. And one of the issues that I find appalling is that tonight we have more people in jail right this moment than any other country on earth. Over 2 million people in jail. And the reason for that is we have a broken and, I dare say, racist criminal justice system, which disproportionately impacts the African American community, the Latino community, and the Native American community. And what our job together is to invest in our young people in jobs and education so they can go out to civil society and earn a good living. Invest in our young people, not in more jails and incarceration. Our criminal justice proposal calls for the elimination of all private prisons and detention centers. It calls for an end to the so-called war on drugs. We will, and this a president can do through the stroke of a pen, legalize marijuana in every state in this country. Too many lives have been destroyed or hurt because of criminal records associated with possession of marijuana. We believe that we should expunge the records of all those arrested for possession of marijuana. And when we talk about systems in America that are broken, we got to take a hard look at a very broken immigration system. We have a president who demonizes the undocumented. But this is a president who, you may recall, is a private businessman, hired hundreds and hundreds of undocumented people in order to get cheap labor. He loved the undocumented when he could exploit them. So we are going to end the demonization of the undocumented. We are going to move forward for comprehensive immigration reform and a path towards citizenship. On our first day in office, we will rescind all of Trump's racist immigration executive orders. And we will restore the legal status of the 1.8 million young people eligible for the DACA program. Under our administration, no federal agent will be snatching babies from the arms of their mothers. We are all appalled by the level of gun violence we see in America, and our stomachs turn when we turn on the TV and see some awful tragedy someplace in America. And that is the bad news, and it is very bad news. 40,000 people a year die from gun-related violence, some suicides, a lot of domestic violence, and we have seen these terrible mass shootings. One of the saddest things that I have ever experienced in my life as a politician running around the country is here in New Hampshire a few months ago. A woman comes up at a town meeting, a woman says, "Bernie, what am I supposed to tell my 11-year-old daughter when she says that she wants a bulletproof backpack for Christmas?" So you got kids in New Hampshire, and I got 3 grandchildren in New Hampshire, you got kids all over this country who are scared. They're living with fear. They see what goes on the television. My view is very strongly that gun policy in America must be written and developed by the American people, not the NRA. And the truth is that over the years, as people have responded and seen these terrible tragedies, views have changed. They've changed in rural states like New Hampshire and Vermont, in urban areas like Chicago and Los Angeles. They have changed in terms of gun owners' views and non-gun owners' views. And there is a consensus, not that every person agrees on every aspect of gun policy, but there is a consensus that says we must have universal background checks. People with violent backgrounds should not own guns. We must end the so-called gun show loophole and the so-called straw man provision. And what has happened in recent years in response to these terrible mass murders is that people now understand something that I have felt strongly about for 30 years. And that is, we must end the sale and distribution of assault weapons in the United States. I'm a United States Senator, and I'm often on the floor of the Senate, and I hear the speeches that my conservative Republican colleagues make. And their mantra, as all of you know, is they believe in small government. They believe in getting the government. If you believe in getting the government off the backs of the American people, understand that it is women in America who must control their own bodies, not the government. And my promise to you is I will never nominate anybody to the Supreme Court or the federal bench who is not 100% pro Roe v. Wade. We will introduce legislation that codifies, puts into law Roe v. Wade. And we will greatly expand funding for Planned Parenthood. So my friends, we're here in Keene tonight, and in 2 days, the first primary of the election season will take place here in New Hampshire. This is an enormously important moment, and the Hampshire primary is the first primary in the country. And what happens here is of enormous consequence. It's not just people all over America are looking at New Hampshire. People all over the world are looking at New Hampshire. So I am here tonight to ask for your support on Tuesday. I'm here tonight to ask you to bring out your friends, your family, your co-workers, your fellow students. If we have the highest voter turnout in New Hampshire primary history, I am confident that we are going to win here in New Hampshire. And if we win here in New Hampshire, we're going to set the pace to win in Nevada and South Carolina and California. So in this unprecedented moment in American history, when we are having the most consequential election in history, let us win here in New Hampshire. Let us win the Democratic nomination. Let us defeat Donald Trump. Let us transform this country. Let us go forward together. Thank you.